Flakey and buttery, I'm talking about biscuits, and today I'm going to show you how to make a tried and true flaky biscuit recipe, and we're also going to talk about some of those common mistakes that we want to avoid. Biscuits are one of those really easy things that many of us can make at home, but if you're like me, I'm always really afraid of failure because I often fail when I bake.
But you know what though, Renee? Give yourself credit, okay? This is our 16th episode, and how many of them have been baking?
A few.
Like 4 or 5, and you've actually done pretty well with all of those. So.
Well, the funny thing is I have made these biscuits like time and time again, Doug, but it just takes like once to just like mess it up and then I feel horrible about myself. But the good thing about these is that they are super easy, and even if they don't like turn out to be beautiful and perfect, they're still gonna taste really good, and that's really all that matters. All we need is flour, of course. I put baking powder and baking soda in mine. I use buttermilk, but how many of us have buttermilk at home? So I use whole milk, and for every cup of whole milk, it's 1 tablespoon of either lemon juice or white vinegar. So I'm actually just gonna do that right now so that it has a few minutes to actually start to curdle. And this is really good because it activates with the baking soda to get those fluffy biscuits. But the key ingredient to this is, do you know what I'm about to say?
Butter.
Cold butter. I actually keep mine in the freezer and I grate it into my actual dough. And I think the colder the butter, when you get it into that super hot oven, it creates the steam and it makes everything rise. All right, we're gonna start the dough, and this is really fast and it is really easy, but the one thing that I can tell you is to not over mix it. So I'm gonna start with my flour. I know how much Doug loves when I measure. Doug, don't start saying anything to me.
I won't heckle you today, I promise.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I always start with my dry ingredients.
But these are biscuits that we have at the restaurant, and they are served with our seafood chowder.
With our chowder at brunch.
Right.
Yeah.
People love them. We often get people asking us for extras.
Yes, always.
But again, it's one of those recipes that it's a lot simpler than you might imagine.
Salt, and then I've got baking powder, and I have baking soda. And I'm just gonna mix this all quickly by hand because your hands are really your best tool. And then here comes the best part. It's the butter, and the butter has to be cold.
And why is that? Why does the butter have to be cold?
If the butter isn't cold, it's basically, as soon as it goes in the oven, it's just gonna start to melt and weep. And then you're gonna end up with like these sad, flat little biscuits. Not that that's a bad thing, so it's still gonna taste good, but you want the butter to melt and create the steam so that they like start to rise. Some people use a food processor, but I find just doing this by hand is therapeutic, and I just really enjoy it. Oh, grating nice frozen butter is quite a workout, but it is worth it in the end. And of course, I'm making a mess, but this is my kitchen, so it's all good. I'm almost there.
This recipe, you really gotta embrace the mess, because once you get the buttermilk in there, things get messy, right?
It does. But the thing is, you know what? I mean, I find baking messy in general, and maybe that's why I don't bake a lot, because I'm so anal about cleanliness. All right, so I've got this all in here, and I'm just going to make sure not to work it. You want to just see those pea-sized pieces of butter in here. And then I'm going to add my liquid. And like I said, remember, this is going to be a really wet, shaggy dough. So do not be frightened or scared because that's just the way it is. And like I said, over mixing is something you don't want to do because then your biscuits will get tough and the butter will warm up. I'm just going to grab some flour. Put it on my counter. Now flip this out. Now, if you don't have one of these fancy ring molds at home, don't use a glass because what's going to happen is it's going to actually bring the edges down so it won't be able to rise properly. I've also used the top of a mason jar before, or you can actually just cut them any shape that you want.
But I guess the key is something relatively sharp, right? Like
sharp. And you also want to make sure that the dough can come through the top so that you're not pushing the dough down. As you can tell, I'm also not using a rolling pin. I'm just using my hands because I don't want to compress my dough too much. I've seen people sort of fold it a few times to kind of get the same effect that you would with a croissant. But I'm just gonna pat mine down. Now, how high do we want these?
Well,
Fairly high?
Yeah, why not? You know, like see how high we can go.
All right, I've also heard where people say, put your biscuits close together on your pan, put them far apart. But one thing that I do know is that you should not twist the cutter when you put it in. Just put it and cut. And then onto our sheet pan. They're beautiful. You can see all the butter sort of like in there, which is what you want.
Because you kind of get, it almost creates layers, in a way.
Well, it creates those really like beautiful flaky layers that you want. I've also sometimes put like cheddar in here. I've put raisins. My mother used to make like a honey butter for biscuits afterwards, which was really nice.
Cool thing about biscuits is they can be used like for something savory or something sweet.
Yes, of course. Like at work, we have it actually only for savory things.
Yeah.
Shockingly enough. All right. So I've got a dozen here, and I probably have enough dough to do about another 5 or 6, but I would just be careful about not trying to overwork it. So I'm just gonna set this aside. I've got some egg wash, which is basically just an egg and milk, and I'm gonna just gently brush the tops of the biscuits.
And why do you do this?
It gives it like a nice glaze and a nice sort of like brown color. Makes it brown better. And then I've got my oven at 450, and these should bake anywhere between 12 and 15 minutes. But I have done it at work. We actually do it at 425 for 10 minutes. So I can't stress enough to just test your oven and see what it's like, because I know ours, sometimes I find that it runs a little low for baking, so I have to change the temperature. All right, last 3, and then into my oven. And these will bake for anywhere between, like I said, between 12 and 15 minutes, but it all depends on your oven. And I can't stress enough that your oven has to be hot.
Your hands look great, by the way. Let's see.
Well, I want to keep washing them.
I know, but
at home, well, I usually
nice and shaggy.
Nice and shaggy, shaggy dough. All right, Doug, I have a biscuit ready for you.
Oh yeah.
I've got
wait.
a little bit of butter.
Okay.
There's not enough butter in the biscuits anyways. And some peach jam that our neighbors made us.
Yes.
Aaron and Beth.
Aaron and Beth down the street.
Yes.
They are amazing with all their treats that they always bring us. Jams and pickles and all that kind of fun stuff. But they look amazing.
Steamy.
Nice and fluffy.
That's the key, fluffy biscuit,
Oh my
right?
God, they're great. They're really good. They're healthy too, right?
Yep.
That's what I
There's
thought. Excellent.
only a cup of butter.
Awesome. But yeah, these are, you know, at the restaurant, people sometimes, I think, get the chowder just so they can have a biscuit. So,
True.
you know, but what we'll do though is we're gonna link to the chowder recipe so you can try to make the chowder and the biscuits and get the full Canteen experience at home.
That's true.
Yeah.
And again, when it comes to baking, if I can do it, so can you. And they turned out great.
They're delicious. They're so good.
Awesome. So like, subscribe,
Yeah.
and then who knows what I'll make next week. It won't be biscuits.
But we got lots of fun content coming, you know, but we are always looking for recommendations. So please keep those coming too. And we just want to thank everybody for supporting what we're doing here, because it's been a lot of fun being out and about in the community and having people come up to Renee and say how much they're enjoying it and say, are you that weird guy in the background that I hear talking all the time? So yeah, so it's been great.
All right, pass the butter, Doug.
So good. Butter makes it better.
True. Thanks.
All right, folks, until the next time.